So Call of Duty Ghosts was quite the interesting Call of Duty title. It wasn't really loved by the community all that much for a long time. I mean, people went back to Black Ops 2 and Modern Warfare 3 because they just could not take this Call of Duty anymore. I mean, first week of launch, couple first weeks of launch, people liked it. And then they started catching on to the fact that it wasn't all that great. They didn't like the campaign, they didn't like Extinction. That kind of stopped people from even bothering to come back with the DLCs. And they were just excited for whatever would happen next with Treyarch, or obviously, and then Advanced Warfare for Sledgehammer Games. But recently, like the past few years, people have been going back and saying, you know what, Call of Duty Ghosts wasn't all that bad. It's the COD cycle. People love to do that. They hate the game at first, and then a few years later, they say, you know what, that game wasn't bad. They're doing it for Infinite Warfare. They're doing it for World War II. They're gonna do it for Black Ops 4. They're doing it for Advanced Warfare, and they're doing it for Call of Duty Ghosts. It's not everyone saying that. There still is a large group of people who don't like this COD, and it's one of their least favorites. But there's also a large group of people that do like this Call of Duty. Now, this is going to be my retrospective review on the game, as objective as humanly possible. We're going to talk about the entirety of the game, from the campaign to the multiplayer to the Extinction, everything this game has to offer. If you want to check out my other Call of Duty retrospective reviews, I've done every one up to Black Ops 2, so from Call of Duty 4 all the way to Black Ops 2. I didn't do the original ones like the 1, 2, and 3, but I did all those, all 6 of them, the last gen CODs, I guess you can call them now, and I have a whole playlist. I'll put a link in the description to them. Please go check them out. I haven't done one of these in a while, but I wanted to hop back in and go through the rest of the CODs because we have another 6 Call of Duties to go leading up to Black Ops 4, and then of course Modern Warfare will come out, and obviously I'll wait till the game's all said and done to do a review on Modern Warfare because I like to review the game as a whole, not just how it was on launch, but how it was throughout the DLC season and how all the post-launch content came together. A whole entire review on this game. So the Modern Warfare retrospective review probably be like 2 years from now, let's be real here, and the Black Ops 4 one will be a little bit later. But I want to get this one done. I want to go to Advanced Warfare, Black Ops 3, and obviously we're going to go in order, and we'll continue to do them when I have the chance to do them. So, how do I feel about Call of Duty Ghosts? Well, objectively speaking, I find it to be meh. That's exactly what I'm going to title this video. I think it is a meh game. It's not good, it's not bad. It's meh. Take it or leave it. That's kind of how I feel about it. And I'm going to go in depth on everything from the campaign to the multiplayer, even the squads mode I'll talk about a little bit. There's going to be specific rating I'm going to give for each of the categories. These categories include campaign, which has a 20% margin, multiplayer, which has a 40% margin, and Extinction, which has another 40% margin, making up the entirety of the game. The reason why I'm not having campaign be as high of a margin as everything else is because campaign just isn't as replayable and as important to the game as I feel like these other two modes are. Campaign's huge, yes, but in terms of community and how people perceive games, they don't usually rate a game based on the campaign. They usually rate the game based on how well the multiplayer was and how well their zombies/Extinction was. That's usually how they feel about Call of Duty games. People don't base the entirety of it on the campaign, therefore I'm not going to base the entirety of this list off a campaign. I'm not going to have campaign count for the same as multiplayer, when that's just not how the community really feels about Call of Duty games that often, you know what I mean? So campaign gets a 20% margin, multiplayer 40, Extinction 40. And you might be wondering, well, without squads mode? Squad mode, it was such a small minor thing in this game. I'm going to include it within multiplayer. It's not going to be a separate thing because why would I bother when it's probably going to get a 5% margin if I even counted it as its own separate thing. So let's get into this, starting with the campaign. So the campaign in this game was okay. It wasn't anything overly special, especially after playing the Modern Warfare campaigns and Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, World at War, all these amazing other ones. Call of Duty Ghosts really just didn't live up to those expectations that we had for COD campaigns, and that's kind of what made it fall short a little bit. I mean, compared to some of the recent campaigns, which I'm going to be honest with you guys, in terms of campaigns, I think the series has gone downhill in terms of storytelling in the campaign-wise. In multiplayer, I think it's been doing just fine. Same with zombies, I think it's been doing just fine. But their campaigns have been kind of falling off base a bit. They've been doing some really crazy action-packed things, but the story just isn't there. And that's kind of what Ghosts is like. It's a fun game. It's such an incredible experience, but the story is just not intriguing enough for me to be entertained. It's like one of those movies Or those awesome like Michael Bay films. It's like, wow, explosions, action, it's so cool. But then you look at the story and you're like, it's not interesting. There's no depth to the story. There's no depth to these characters. So that's kind of how I feel about this campaign. Now, I love the atmosphere. The post-apocalyptic atmosphere is something very unique and different to Call of Duty Ghosts. We didn't see this before. We haven't seen this before. You know, we go from the modern setting to the past to the future with Black Ops 2, and they come into Ghosts. It's like, okay, well, what setting are we going to do? And they do something completely different, a post-apocalyptic future. And I want to see this again because it's such a cool location for the game. It has some amazing set pieces, some awesome imagery, and just some beautiful it's a beautiful looking game. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I know people call it dull and gray, but that dull and grayness looks damn sexy in campaign, I gotta say. Multiplayer, not so much. But the way it just all comes together, especially some of the missions, it looks beautiful. And there is like some colors in there. I'm not saying it's just dull and gray, but obviously in a post-apocalyptic world, it's going to be a little darker than something like Black Ops 2 or Advanced Warfare. The guns feel and sound really good. I mean, this is something that has to do with multiplayer as well, but in just overall, the guns just feel clean in this game, and I really like how that adds to the experience for the campaign. And like I said, the action and the set pieces are amazing. They got some really cool missions specifically. Remember the one when the dam exploded and all the water came out through the place and you have to like go up to the buildings and get higher ground while there's like water flooding the place? That's cool. The final mission, called Ghost Killer, one of the coolest missions in Call of Duty history. And now I know people hated the ending for it being a little bit annoying and too cliffhangery and kind of unrealistic, the way that, how the hell did Rourke survive that and somehow swim all the way to the top? Well, it's a video game. I'm able to, look past realism and shit like that and just enjoy the fact that it was a pretty cool and shocking twist. I'm not going to lie, the fact that Rourke survived. And it definitely led for a possibility of a Ghost 2 sequel, which didn't happen because people didn't like this game. Therefore, they were like, all right, we got to drop the Ghost title and we got to do something different, which they did with Infinite Warfare, which people hated even more, unfortunately. But I enjoyed that twist in the end. I enjoyed that mission as a whole. I know the realism behind it's like, well, it's not there, but that doesn't take away from the impact of the mission itself. I think it was a fun one. Now let's get into the cons, because like I said, there's a lot of cons that have to do with this. The characters are uninteresting. I mean, you go from characters like Price, Woods, Soap, Mason, all these in-depth characters, to Logan and Hesh. They're just such generic people. Like, I hate to say it, but they're very generic guys. There's not really depth to them. I mean, Logan we know nothing about, because I know the main protagonist, they usually don't speak. Well, at least in the Modern Warfare games, the main protagonist never really spoke. I mean, of course they did in Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2, which added depth to the character. But when the main protagonist doesn't speak, you don't know anything about them. But what Modern Warfare did is they allowed us to still learn about these characters through cutscenes. We get to hear their voices. Through other missions, we would play as different characters. Like, for example, we would finally be able to play as someone like Price in the final mission, and we get to see Yuri in action, when previously we were playing as Yuri the whole campaign, so we never got to see him. Now we actually get to learn about him, hear his voice, get kind of a sense of what his character's like. But this game never did that. Logan, we never heard his voice once. There was no voice actor to him. There was no personality to him, and therefore how are we supposed to feel connected to this character when we don't know anything about him? And I know they're trying to go for this you're in the game experience sort of a deal, but I don't like that. It's supposed to feel like a movie, not like in like a military simulator sort of a deal. So I wasn't a fan of how they handled that, and Hesh even wasn't really that great. I mean, Merrick was kind of cool, but like they're just cool. They're not interesting. There's no depth to them. And don't even get me started on the villain. Rourke is one of the most boring villains in the entire franchise. You go from people like Menendez, Shepard, Makarov, all these in-depth political schemes that they have behind them, all these crazy ideologies and crazy awesome, first of all, the voice actors for them are amazing. And then you go to someone like Rourke, who's just boring. He's literally a guy who's pissed off because he was left behind by his father, or not by his father, but by Logan and Hesh's father, Elias. He was left behind when he used to be a ghost, and now he gets pissed off and he was brainwashed by the Federation. It's like, okay, well, brainwashing is the most annoying and stupid thing I've ever heard of in most storylines. It's like, okay, like you're not really motivated in the way that villains should be motivated to do what you're doing. Therefore, Rorkus wasn't an interesting villain. I mean, maybe they could have turned him into something interesting in the second Ghost, but there's no real backing behind his character to make me care at all, to be completely honest. But yeah, that's about it. I mean, the Federation too, we didn't really get to learn much about them. We also kind of took a step backwards compared to Black Ops 2, because Black Ops 2 introduced these awesome fully rendered cutscenes throughout the campaign, but this game kind of went back into how the Modern Warfare formula went and just had these little intros that were like a minute and a half long rather than actually including cutscenes, which, yeah, I guess they probably couldn't. Maybe they didn't have the time to do it, but still, the cutscenes added a lot to the campaigns. So for a campaign, I'm going to give it a 14 out of 20, which is a 70% score. That's not bad, but that's not good either. That's just like kind of average. And, you know, that's kind of, imagine you get a 70 on a test, you know, it's not like good, it's not bad, it's just like, I did average. That's kind of how it is here. I think the enjoyment of it, the awesome missions, the action definitely adds a lot to it. But just the story itself definitely removes from that enjoyment. So up next is the multiplayer, of course. And now we're talking about multiplayer, one of the most hated multiplayers in the Call of Duty franchise. Now, I didn't hate this multiplayer. I actually didn't hate it at all, even at launch. I played a lot of this game, and mainly because I enjoyed it. I had a good time, but of course there's pros and there's cons that need to be talked about. So let's start off with the cons, actually, because the cons are pretty severe for what they are. Some of them are problems for some people more so than others. Starting off, the launch maps sucked. I think this is pretty much known for the entire community, is kind of universally talked about. The fact that the launch maps just were not good, especially for 6v6. The maps were too big, they didn't play well, they ended up causing a lot of camping, a lot of just slow-paced gameplay. I mean, you compare it to Black Ops 2, which was insanely fast-paced, it was not good. I mean, it was slow-paced, this game. It was crazy. And I remember people just hating on it. I mean, obviously you had a few good maps like Strike Zone, which was a ton of fun, and you only wanted to play Strike Zone because it was one of the only good maps in the launch version of this game. But there's a silver lining to it. The DLC maps were amazing. Oh my god, the DLC season for this game, for multiplayer's sake, was one of my favorite DLC seasons of all time. You had maps like Mutiny, Fog, Pharaoh, the one with the Gold Rush, I believe, with the little car thingies. You had some awesome remakes of some classics. I mean, you had a great DLC season. The reason why the maps were so good, because they made them smaller, more 3-lane sort of, and they were so unique. That's the one thing Ghost did that I love, is the maps were insanely unique and different than each other because of two factors. One, the dynamic maps, the Levolution. They had a little bit of that. It wasn't very keen or anything like that, but they had some of that. They had some map-based events where something would happen midway through the map, which happens in other Call of Duties, of course, but they did it more so in this game. And you had map-based streaks that you can get from field orders, which field orders is another awesome system that's never returned for some reason. Field orders are those little thingies. You can pick up the little briefcase from an enemy and you can complete a challenge, and if you can complete the challenge, you get a care package, and that care package can reward you with a map-based streak. And just about every map, most maps at least, had a map-based streak. They did the same thing in Advanced Warfare, where some maps had map-based streaks. I really want them to return that system. It's an awesome system, and you can only get these map-based streaks out of care packages. Now, I absolutely love that system because it made maps feel so different from one another. You'd play on a map like Mutiny and you can call in these ghost pirates. You'd play on a map like Gold Rush and you can call in these pack of wolves. You play on a map like Fog and you get to become Michael Myers. That is awesome. The DLC maps were great. I could understand someone who didn't get the DLC season, understandable that they wouldn't like this game completely. I would probably not like this game. Would go down like a whole nother couple points if you just take away the DLC. But I'm including the DLC. That's technically still part of the game. I'm not going to not include it just because it's something you have to pay for. I'm talking about the entirety of the game, and the DLC maps really did help this game a lot. It makes it so much more replayable because of the different maps that they have and the awesome different elements to them. And they're very unique. They all have different like themes to them. There's like the scary theme, you got the pirate theme, you got the mummy theme, Egyptian, all these different cool little themes that make the maps feel different. Yeah, they're not realistic. They're kind of goofy because they're not like, military style maps. But who cares? It's a video game. Have some fun. You know what I mean? I think that was awesome. I'm going back to some bad things about the game, though. I just wanted a whole tangent about some good support streaks. There was a system in Modern Warfare 3 that I did not like. I didn't like the fact that you can earn streaks for basically not really going on a streak. You're just getting them for getting kills. Now, I understand their support, so they're not really going to give you that much an advantage, but I still don't think that should be a system. I think it should just be Assault and Specialist. You get your streaks based on staying alive, not based off just getting kills. And I get what they were going for. They wanted people who maybe aren't good enough to earn assault streaks to be able to get support streaks. So they're at least helping the team for getting kills, even if they can't stay alive. But that's just, holding the hands of people who aren't very good at the game. And I don't really like when games do that. That's stuff like death streaks or specialists. I don't really like that when they're hand holding people who aren't very good, because that takes away the awesomeness it is to be really good at the game. You know what I mean? The SATCOM, hated that system. I hated the fact that they replaced the UAV with a little thingy that you placed on the ground, because it doesn't do the same effect as the UAV unless you have multiple of them. So it's kind of like lessening the effect of what a UAV would be, and it's annoying having to place it down because it's pretty easy for people to destroy them. And especially if they have, the thing where the perk where you get to see through walls, they're gonna go and destroy that thing pretty easily. All you have to do is just knife it once to destroy it. So that was a weird system. I wasn't a big fan of it. The time to kill was way too fast. I mean, really fast. It made it so it was basically the first person to shoot gets the kill. That's kind of how this game was. It wasn't very keen on being able to fight back in gunfights. If you got shot, you were probably going to die, which kind of made for slower gameplay because people were more scared to run out in the open, so therefore they were camping more often, and that kind of slowed down the game a little bit, on top of the fact that the maps were huge at launch, and just the maps are kind of made for camping. So it's kind of a similar problem that I have to Modern Warfare, the recent game, is the fact that the time to kill is just way too damn fast. It just needs to be shortened just a little bit. And final negative that I can think of is the camping. Yeah, like there was a lot of camping in this game, and I know that's not something that's easy to control by the developers. It's like, they can't force people not to camp, but just the way the maps were designed in some ways, not really the DLC maps as much as is mainly referring to the on-disc maps, but there's just a very abundant amount of camping that was done within this multiplayer. And the multiplayer was just really dull looking. The colors weren't nice, the graphics were pretty meh compared to like Black Ops 2. But, it was a next-gen game. It was the first one on next-gen, so you got to give the benefit of the doubt. They had to port the game from last-gen to next-gen, and that kind of had a whole thing happen. Because after that, with Advanced Warfare, then they actually made the game on next-gen, and then they ported it over to last-gen. But this one, they had to make it on last-gen and port it over to next-gen, so it was this whole weird thing. And the player counts are really small because the game is so split up from so many different consoles, which is unfortunate. It's really hard to get in the lobbies these days. Now the good things. Like I said, amazing DLC maps. Gun balance was pretty damn good. I really enjoy the gun balance in this game. There's a lot of guns to use and a lot of different varieties of setups you can go with, especially with the perk system, which they had all these awesome perks that you could choose from, which was different than Pick 10, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't going back to the old system where it was like kind of stupid because you're forced to use a perk. 1 or 3 perks, you're forced to use a lethal or tactical. This gave you so much more customization between the perks, because perks have point values, and there's like, okay, the better perks cost more and the worse ones cost less. That was an awesome system that I really wish Modern Warfare picked back up on, because it made for some really awesome create a class options. They had a random create a class thing where you can like press this button and it randomly creates you a class, which was awesome as well. The attachments, they had a pretty good amount of them. They had some really awesome camos. I really enjoyed the customization in this game. Now, the character customization was also a pretty big thing because it was the first COD to actually have character customization. But of course, a lot of them were locked behind a paywall, but it was fine because it wasn't locked behind supply drops, at least. That's, I guess, fortunate, but also unfortunate because at least supply drops, you can still earn them for free somehow if you get lucky. But in this case, you can only buy them. But there were things that you can unlock for free, of course, within the game. There wasn't like there was nothing to unlock. Of course, there was tons of outfits you can unlock for free just by completing challenges and leveling up, which was fun. It was the first COD to really go deep with customization, because before this, the only other COD that had customization for your character was Black Ops 1 with the face paints. So this was a nice step in the right direction to what we can see in the future with character customization, which has been a huge part of recent Call of Duties. Next up, the HUD. HUD was clean as hell, man. That HUD was awesome. I love how they show your kills in the top right corner. I love how the minimap looks. I love how the scoreboard looks. It's a really well done HUD. Love it. I love it so much. And finally, this game added a ton of new modes like Cranked, Blitz, and a ton of awesome party modes. They really did all out with the modes. I love that a lot. They had Search and Rescue as well, which was different, but they still had Search and Destroy, so that was good. So yeah, that's multiplayer. I'm going to give it a 30 out of 40. So that's a 75% score, kind of average, a little bit above, your normal average, but it's not good enough, like, because of mainly the time to kill and the fact that it's kind of slower paced and stuff like that. That definitely puts a bad taste in my mouth when I'm playing this game. The streaks aren't very good either. I forgot to mention that. They're not that powerful. They're fun to use, but they're not that powerful, so you can't go on some tears with them. But the game has some great DLC maps, which really adds to, I guess, just making the game more replayable. And if it sucks if you don't have the DLC, but if you do, it's a pretty fun game. So I'm going to give it a 75%, 30 out of 40. Let's move on to Extinction. Hold up, I forgot to mention Squads mode, but I realized who the hell gives a shit about Squads mode. It's literally I've played it maybe once in my entire life, and I have no interest in going back to playing it. So yeah, I'm just gonna forget that mode even existed, to be completely honest. And now we are moving on to Extinction, the replacement for zombies in this game. I think Infinity Ward realized that people love zombies so much more than Spec Ops. They knew they had to do something supernatural, something out of this world, something that sets it apart from your normal campaign and multiplayer modes. So they went with this alien-like mode, which was a great idea, I think. And I think it actually ended up being something that was good for the game and definitely could have been worked upon and improved upon in the future. But the problem that lied within Extinction is one particular thing, and it's the fact that the gameplay is insanely linear. I give it credit for being very different than zombies and not just copying the zombies formula, which I honestly would rather them copy the zombies formula, because they did that in Infinite Warfare and it worked out so much better with IW zombies, as well as just the other zombies modes that we've had from the non-Treyarch developers, honestly. But I do give them credit at least for trying something different, which it just didn't work out for the better. I think the problem lied in the community, the fact that no one really wanted something different than zombies. They couldn't accept something different. They knew zombies was so much better, therefore they didn't want to play this. But I tried to look at it as its own thing. I tried to look at it through a different lens, but the problem lied in the fact that it didn't feel like a third mode. More so, it just felt like a campaign mission. And what I mean by that is your campaign missions are pretty linear. You usually don't play them multiple times. You don't play them as many times as you possibly can because they're so linear. They feel the same every time. It's like watching a movie. It's the same thing every time. You might learn some new things. You might find some new things when you watch it a second time, but at the end of the day, it's going to be very similar to your other experiences. That's what sets zombies so far apart, is because zombies is almost different every time. You can go different routes. You can get different guns out of the box. You can get different wonder weapons. Different things can happen. Different power-ups can drop that completely change your run. That makes zombies unique. But this mode, it feels so similar. You usually end up picking up the same guns. You usually end up going the same routes. You usually end up doing the same sort of a deal every game. Now, of course, you can change up your methods a little bit. They do give you some options, but at the end of the day, it still feels insanely linear, and that kind of became a problem. Because that's why I usually ended up going and playing the maps once when they came out and then usually never touching them again. Obviously, I had to play all of them again for this video, but I did not have a fun time going through the maps. I was honestly just trying to get through them just for the gameplay, and I realized this is just not really that fun to me. It's unique, it's different, but it's not fun. The story wasn't there either. There was no interest in story. It wasn't like I was trying to go, oh, I can't wait for the next one. I mean, the story just wasn't in depth enough for me. They had some cool radios and stuff like that. The cutscenes were well done, but I mean, that's about it. You know, I didn't really care for it. And I know other people did, and that's completely fine. That's a valid reason to enjoy it. But at the end of the day, was the story all that good? I don't know. To me, it really wasn't. And it just can get very boring. I mean, this is kind of how this game mode is. I think the maps definitely were different than each other, though. There were a few maps I enjoyed more so than others, but specifically Point of Contact, Nightfall, and Mayday. I like the first 3 maps a lot more than the other 2. Awakening was just weird, first of all. I didn't like how that was set up, and Exodus was just kind of annoying to play. It was a really cool looking map, but it was kind of annoying at the end of the day. Just the fact that there was it was like these challenges you had to do where you go in these little circles and then a bunch of aliens would come run at you and you'd be like, oh shit. And it was almost too hectic at some points. Like, it never gave you some time to just chill out. It was just aliens. And I'm like, well, there's a million different types of them too, so you got to keep up with them. It's a difficult mode, especially when you get into some later points in the map, which I like difficulty. So yeah, Extinction can be fun with friends. I agree. I'm not, throwing that out the table. But I think the problem lies in what I just said, the linear feel. There was no replay value in Extinction. It had some fun first experiences, for sure. I had a great time when I first played the maps. But like I said, after that, what is there to do? What is there to do? Not much. Not much, and that's kind of unfortunate. I do like the creative class system that they had introduced, how you can be engineer, you can be, the assault man, you can be all different types, you can be the medic. That made for some interesting gameplay, especially when you're playing with your friends. You all have your own position, your own role in the game, and that was cool. I liked that a lot. But did that go so far as to being something that you'd want to play every day? Not really. I honestly, like I said, played the maps once, never touched them again. So, Extinction, I'm going to give a 21 out of 40. So that's about a 55-ish, like 56-ish, 57. I'll do the math on that. You'll see it on the screen. But not a very good score for the mode, I know. But I just didn't have much of an enjoyment in this mode. I think it all lies down to what I said before. The linear gameplay and the uninteresting story made for it so it wasn't replayable, and it felt more like campaign missions that you'd play once and never play again. But at least campaign had interesting story, or for the most part, but this just didn't, so I didn't really care to see what happens next at all, to be completely honest. So that is Extinction. Let's move on to the final verdict of Call of Duty Ghosts. So at the end of the day, Call of Duty Ghosts is going to get a score of 65 out of 100, which is of course 65%. So compared to the other Call of Duties we've ranked thus far in terms of this Call of Duty retrospective reviews, Call of Duty 4 had 73%, World at War had 63%, Modern Warfare 2 had 70%, Black Ops 1 had 84%, Modern Warfare 3 had 68%, and Black Ops 2 had 93%. So this game has gone higher than World at War, and that's it. The other ones have all been higher than Call of Duty Ghosts. So, and looking back on a ranking sort of a deal with these maps, this kind of is similar to where I would normally put COD Ghosts. I would usually put it towards the end of the list, not towards the dead bottom or anything like that. I think it's definitely higher than a few games. But what falls short is the lack of a good third mode, the lack of an interesting and intriguing campaign, and just lack of an amazing multiplayer experience. It's definitely a good experience, trust me, but it's not an amazing experience, and that's why I'm calling it meh. It's not bad. Meh does not mean bad. Meh just means take it or leave it, you know? I'd play this game multiple times, I will. It's a fun game, the multiplayer especially, but the rest of it, it almost felt like a chore to go back and play. I didn't really want to play the campaign again. I didn't really want to play Extinction again, which when you don't want to play something, you know there's something wrong with it. But I'm objective about this. I'm not going to be personal about everything, like I said. Therefore, I look at it objectively, and that's why, even though I include some of my subjective opinions, like saying that Extinction isn't all that interesting to me, that's a subjective opinion, but I back it up with objective reasoning, like the fact that the gameplay is very linear, therefore making it an objective opinion. I'm not including my subjective opinion in these reasonings, just my objective opinion. But I'm going to include talking about it. I'm not going to include it in the scoring itself. So, Call of Duty Ghost is all said and done. Time to move on to Advanced Warfare. That's the next one I have to do, which, to be completely honest, one of my least favorite Call of Duties of all time. But maybe I'll change my mind after I replay it a bunch. We'll see. I gotta go play the campaign again. I gotta play multiplayer some more. Gotta try Exo Survival, Exo Zombies, all that stuff. And we'll see how I feel about it. Maybe within a few weeks I'll have that video up. I don't know. Have to wait and see. I'm trying to get these all done before Christmas time so I can do a big ranking of every COD game once Christmas time is around, and also a ranking of the best campaign missions around Christmas time. We can get that all done around then. So hopefully I can get these all done before then. Hopefully you guys enjoy. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.